She taught yoga every evening. But in the end, the only chakra that opened was my own heart, split wide by a truth I never expected. My name is Haruki. I'm 42 years old, a teacher of fine arts at a modest high school in Kyoto. My days were filled with the smell of charcoal pencil, the scrape of brush against rice paper, and the quiet joy of guiding students to find form where there was once only blankness. I lived in a house my grandfather built, wooden beams, sliding shoji doors, a small garden of raked gravel, and a pond where two koi circled each other endlessly. My wife, Mika, 36, was the kind of woman who seemed born into stillness. She moved like silk across tatami mats, spoke in measured tones, and never raised her voice. A certified yoga instructor, she had transformed the spare room into a studio where she taught private sessions. For years, it was a gentle rhythm, my work during the day, her sessions in the evening, and shared dinners under the dim lantern light. 3 months ago, a new rhythm entered our home. Her name was Yuki. Yuki was a recent arrival to our neighborhood, a widow. They said, younger than most assumed, with a soft voice and sharper eyes. She rented the old wooden house next to ours. And within weeks, she and Mika had become inseparable. Mika offered to teach her yoga as a form of grief therapy. I thought it noble. Mika always had a soft spot for broken things. Their sessions became nightly, always around 6, always with the studio door closed. And then, locked. I didn't question it at first. In Kyoto, privacy is a custom, not a suspicion. But things shifted. Mika began burning sandalwood incense with such intensity that its scent lingered even in our bedroom. She played Indian ragas, slow, haunting melodies filled with sitar and tabla, songs more suitable for trance than stretching. Once, I returned home early and found her in the hallway, startled, her kimono misaligned, a sheen of sweat on her collarbone. She laughed it off. We were doing hot yoga. Very intense. I smiled. Of course, but something felt off, like watching a calligraphy piece that's beautiful, but slightly unbalanced. Mika, for all her calm, became more evasive. I noticed how her phone stayed face down. She silenced it with a practiced flick. She took longer showers. Her answers to simple questions stretched, became softer around the edges, filled with more words but fewer truths. I once joked at dinner, "So, did you and Yuki ascend to the 7th chakra today?" She smiled, but didn't laugh. Then there was the music. Low and rhythmic, it pulsed through the walls during their sessions. Not the usual instructional calm of yoga, but something intimate, earthier. I couldn't place it, but my body reacted before my mind could name it. A quiet discomfort, like realizing the water in your tea has gone cold only after you've swallowed it. I started spending more time by the koi pond during those hours. Listening, not eavesdropping, just hearing, the occasional giggle, a whisper, once, a moan, brief, almost masked by the sitar. I told myself stories. They're grieving together, they're healing. Women bond differently, but the stories began to collapse under their own weight, like a painting ruined by too many brushstrokes. There was a night, late October, when Mika returned to the house much later than usual. Her eyes were glassy, her cheeks flushed. She kissed me on the forehead, not the lips, and said she was going to bed early. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at my untouched cup of matcha, feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. Our dinners became quieter, the silences more pronounced, yet I didn't confront her, not because I lacked the courage, but because I feared the answer. What would I say? Are you in love with our neighbor? What if she said yes? What if she said no, but looked away when she did? In Kyoto, we learn to respect space. In relationships, in conversation, in sorrow, but some spaces grow too wide, too quiet. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home, walking barefoot on floors that no longer knew me. She still cooked miso soup the way I liked, still folded my clothes with precision, still asked about my students. But all of it felt performed, like a tea ceremony hosted for a guest who no longer wanted to drink. Then came the final straw. though I didn't know it then. Mika bought new candles, thick, red ones with patterns etched into their wax. She lit him only during her sessions with Yuki. I asked, casually, where she found them. They're sacred, for energy work, she said. Energy work? Yes, Tantra. It's deeper than yoga. She looked at me then. For a moment too long. I nodded. In my art studio that night, I drew a koi leaping from water, escaping a net made of hands. I didn't know what it meant, only that I couldn't sleep. That was when I began watching. Not obsessively, just observing, taking note of the rhythm she claimed was peace, and realizing it was hiding something else entirely. What she didn't know was that our home, built by my grandfather, had secrets of its own, including a small camera tucked high on the beam near the ceiling of the hallway. It wasn't modern surveillance. It was old, analog, a leftover from years ago when I documented my renovation work. I hadn't touched the device in ages. But now, I wondered, what had it seen? I retrieved the old memory card. And the world I thought I lived in would soon end, not with a scream, but with a silent press of play. People say feminine energy finds its match easily. But how aligned do two souls have to be? To spend 2 hours tangled on a mat with the door locked. It started with a mistake. Not theirs, mine. I was sorting through my old tech drawer, looking for a spare USB to share some lesson plans. A small SD card, dusty and unmarked, tumbled onto the floor. I remembered then, it belonged to the analog camera I used years ago to record my virtual art tutorials. The camera had long been shelved, half forgotten, but the card still held something. Curious, I slotted it into my laptop. And then I stopped breathing. The first few files were exactly what I expected, me explaining brush techniques, showing students how to layer ink. Then, suddenly, the file names changed, timestamps that didn't match my sessions. Short clips, 30 minutes, 50, 1 over an hour and a half. I clicked. The angle was odd, mounted from the ceiling beam. Wide view of the spare room. Mika's studio. The room was dimly lit. Candles burned low in corners. Incense curled toward the ceiling. 2 mats lay side by side. And then, Mika and Yuki. They weren't meditating. They weren't stretching. The movements were slow, deliberate, intimate. Hands tracing skin, lips pressing temples, breaths in sync. And then, more, they undressed each other with reverence. Not haste. Bodies folding, pressing, merging, not in lust, but in what they whispered was union. Beloved, Mika whispered in a voice I didn't know she owned. The energy is perfect tonight. Yuki said, you're glowing. They spoke of chakras, of heart lines, of a journey beyond the flesh. They said they were healing, that this was sacred, that no one else would understand. I understood enough. I closed the laptop. It wasn't rage I felt. Not betrayal, just a vacuum, like all the air in the room had fled, leaving behind only static. I went to the garden, sat beside the koi pond, and watched the fish swim in endless circles. I tried to match their rhythm, their unthinking calm. My chest ached like a bruise pressed too hard. Memories flashed without order. Our wedding. The night we moved into this house. The first time Mika cried in my arms after her mother passed. I thought of the meals I cooked when she came home tired. Of the haiku she once wrote about my laugh. I thought of how she still folded my socks together, even when angry. And now, I had watched her love. But not me. I didn't storm inside. I didn't confront her. I let the koi pass. I let the candles burn themselves down in my mind. I let the silence do what it always did in Kyoto, soak everything. Then settle. Later that night, Mika came to bed smelling of sandalwood. She kissed my forehead. Her hands were warm. She said, you look tired. I nodded. She slept soundly. I didn't. In the morning, I walked her to the Genkan as usual. She smiled, adjusting her shawl. I studied her face like a painting I'd seen before but never really understood. There was serenity there, a secret kept perfectly, not with guilt, but with devotion. As she left, she turned back once, Tonight's session might go long, she said. I only bowed. The koi pond reflected the sky. I saw myself in it, but distorted. A man not quite whole. A silhouette shaped by doubt. I didn't tell anyone, not even my brother, who lived in Osaka and called weekly. What would I say? That my wife had found Nirvana through our neighbor's body. That her spiritual awakening left me anchored to the physical world. Cold and confused. Instead, I returned to the studio. I painted. First, abstract bursts of red and orange. Then, a woman dissolving into mist. Then, two trees growing from the same root but bending in opposite directions. That evening, Mika hosted another session. I didn't watch the feed. I didn't need to. The incense returned, the locked door, the music. But I listened. Not for words. For tone. The soft gasp. The shared breath. The cadence of something beyond exercise. When she emerged, hours later, her hair was wet, not from sweat, but a shower. Want some tea? She asked. I shook my head. She sat beside me anyway. Watched the koi with me. Neither of us spoke. For a moment, I considered asking her to be honest. To explain. But then she rested her head against my shoulder. Not with affection, with comfort. Like I was her old sweater. Familiar, harmless. That was when I realized. She wasn't hiding from me. She had already left. Her body remained. Her rituals. Her smile. But Mika, the one I married, had stepped beyond. Beyond yoga. Beyond fidelity. Beyond me. And I was the last to see it. She taught yoga, but I've never seen a yoga session that required a locked door, or ended in moans during meditation. I started collecting moments. That's what artists do, don't they? We gather fragments until the whole picture forms. Even if we never meant to see it clearly. I began quietly, no accusations. No confrontation, just patterns. Mika's sessions with Yuki became more frequent. The schedule on the wall changed subtly. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, always after sunset, always when incense burned thick and the paper shoji doors clicked shut. I began recording them, not video, just timestamps. Notes. When Mika entered, when Yuki left, when the music rose and when silence fell again. I noticed things. Her phone, always tucked face down, a new app I didn't recognize. Disguised under a generic name. Messages she answered with half smiles. Never when I looked over her shoulder. One night, when she was showering, I checked. The app required a code. But the name on the lock screen was unmistakable. Yuki. The preview read only. When our breaths matched last night. I felt our crown chakras open together. I set the phone down. My fingers shook, not from jealousy, but from the clarity that had begun to rise like mist over the koi pond. This wasn't an affair of impulse. It was a belief, a philosophy, a commitment cloaked in mysticism. I started researching, late into the night, by the light of my tablet. Terms like chakra union, tantric alignment, energetic mirroring. At first, it sounded like nonsense, but then I found a community, a hidden forum, invitation only, that Mika had likely found first. A corner of the internet where spiritual intimacy and erotic transformation merged, wrapped in Sanskrit words and half-truths. I dug deeper. They weren't just practicing yoga. They were performing a ritualistic blend of energy exchange and emotional transcendence. One guide, written like scripture, outlined positions, chants, even dietary restrictions before sessions. And in a photo set, blurred but revealing, I spotted the exact incense burner Mika kept. The same design, the same pattern of candles placed around the mat. She had recreated a temple. In our home. A few days later, I asked her casually about her class. She said Yuki was making progress spiritually, and had reached a new level of openness. Openness to what? I asked, sipping my tea. She smiled without blinking. To herself. The lie wasn't in her words. It was in the stillness behind them. The kind that only comes from rehearsing. I reached out to an old friend, Sora, who had trained with Mika years ago. A real yoga instructor, now teaching in Sapporo. Does any of this sound normal? I asked, reading some of the terms Mika used. There was a long pause over the call. "No," Sora said, "that's not yoga, that's a performance, a kind of erotic theater masquerading as enlightenment. It's not taught, it's chosen. Could someone be manipulated into it?" I asked. "Or choose it to escape something?" She replied, "Some people use healing as an excuse to abandon who they used to be." That night, I sat at my painting desk. I opened a blank canvas. But instead of brushstrokes, I made a list. Mika started using essential oils 3 months ago. She stopped asking for foot massages 2 months ago. She no longer lit incense for our shared meditation, only for hers. She placed a padlock on her studio door last week. None of these meant anything alone. But together, they were a sentence, a declaration. She wasn't just leaving me physically. She was converting into something that no longer included me. I thought back to her excuses, to the stories she told others about me, that I was withdrawn, quiet, cold, that she craved warmth, spontaneity, spiritual connection. I had thought it was frustration. But now I saw, it was the scaffolding of her escape. She was building her exit from the inside out. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched our koi, their colors reflected in the water like fireflies. They swam without purpose, yet always in rhythm. Mika wasn't cheating on me, not in the way the world defines it. She was abandoning one life for another. And I was the husk she would shed behind. But not yet, not before I understood the full shape of her new world. Because as much as I wanted to burn it all down, a part of me still needed to know, where I had failed to see. To speak, to touch, to be the man whose breath matched hers. Instead, it was Yuki's, and I was only beginning to understand what that meant. I didn't ask her why. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything, I didn't storm out into the Kyoto night like a wounded lover from a soap opera. Instead, I watched, observed, because when betrayal is wrapped in incense and cloaked in spiritual jargon, sometimes the only truth that cuts through is silence. It was a spring evening, soft with the scent of plum blossoms. The kind of evening when the koi swims slower, when the bamboo creaks gently, and the world feels painted in watercolors. I came home early from school. The students had finished their exhibition early. And I didn't tell Mika. I simply wanted to see the garden in the changing light. As I stepped into the yard, I heard the music, low, undulating tones from a sitar track. The glow of candles flickered through the rice paper panels of Mika's studio. The same studio that had once been our shared meditation space. Now locked, renamed, and renamed again, her sanctum. The door was ajar, not wide, just enough to see Yuki's silhouette. Curved and glistening, back arched, breath synchronized with Mika's. Their bodies were not in warrior pose. This was not yoga, this was communion. I didn't step in, I didn't need to. I placed something quietly by the entrance, a small plastic case containing the memory card. I had written one line across its white label. Art teachers don't need cameras. But husbands do. It was enough. I turned and walked out to the engawa, the wooden walkway that overlooked our koi pond. I sat down with my legs crossed, feeling the grain of the wood under my palms. My cat, Tama, padded over and curled into my lap. She purred, unaware of the rupture. Behind me, I heard the shuffle, the gasp, the hurried whispers, and then, footsteps. Haruki. Mika's voice was cracking, breathless. She stepped outside, still wrapped in a loose linen shawl. Hair wild, eyes red. Let me explain. Was it healing? I asked, still not turning around. Or was it escape? She froze. You don't understand, she said. Then make me. She knelt beside me, but not too close. It's not what you think. She began. I think, I interrupted, that you built a sanctuary in our home, filled it with language I didn't speak, and then barred me from entry. She wiped a tear away. It wasn't about sex. It never was. No, I said. It was about identity, about being seen, about becoming someone else. From behind her, Yuki emerged, composed, dressed, aloof. This is sacred to us, she said coldly. Then why hide it? Neither answered. You could have told me, I said, that I wasn't what you needed anymore. Mika looked away. I didn't want to hurt you. You did anyway, just slower. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Yuki took her hand. You don't understand our connection. Yuki said. Maybe not, I replied, but I understand betrayal, and the quiet cruelty of being erased. They left me there. Eventually, I sat until the stars came out. Until the incense burned away and the frogs began their chorus. Tama stretched, flicked her tail, and slipped away into the bushes. I stayed, because silence, too, is a statement, and that night, it said everything I couldn't bear to scream. I never entered that studio again, never asked Mika to explain further, because no answer could undo the truth already burned into the walls. She had turned our marriage into a mirror that reflected only herself. And I was left to pick up the shards, one breath. One night, one tear at a time. I didn't ask for my love back. All I asked for was my voice, a place in the story they told themselves as healing. And when they refused me even that, I wrote it myself. After that spring night, I left Kyoto. No drama, no divorce lawyers storming into courtrooms. No headlines or neighborhood whispers. I simply packed a small duffel, fed the koi one last time, and gave my neighbor the key to feed Tama. I moved into a small monastery tucked in the misty folds of the Arashiyama Mountains. The air there was quiet in a way that didn't demand silence, it offered it. I shared tea with monks who said little, smiled much, and never once asked about my past. I wasn't a husband there, not a betrayed man. Just Haruki, a man who had once taught art and now watched leaves fall like brushstrokes from heaven. During the afternoons, I began to write. It started as notes, observations, scattered thoughts about love, identity, ritual, and performance. But the more I wrote, the more it turned into something coherent, a memoir, perhaps, but more than that, a reckoning. I titled it, She Found the Way. In Her Girlfriend. Half memoir, half satire. It was neither cruel nor forgiving. I didn't seek vengeance, I simply told the truth. Described the incense, the candles, the chakra alignment that excluded me. The betrayal not of sex, but of sincerity. When it was finished, I sent it to a small independent publisher run by a former student. He called me 3 days later. This is brutal, he said, and brilliant. Within 2 weeks, it had gone viral. Forums lit up. Men and women across spectrums of experience began to share their own stories. LGBTQ communities debated the ethics of hidden desires and spiritual bypassing. Betrayed spouses found a strange solace in my words. Even therapists began recommending the book as a case study. But more than the controversy, what echoed most were the emails. Hundreds, then thousands. Messages from readers who had also been left out of their partner's quests for truth. People who had been used as mirrors or placeholders or safe havens before being discarded for something more authentic. They didn't call me brave. They called me seen. Mika never contacted me, neither did Yuki. I heard from an old mutual friend that they had moved to a commune in northern Japan. Somewhere colder, more remote, perhaps that suited them. They always preferred isolation wrapped in purpose. I didn't need closure from them, because I had created something they never gave me, space. Space to be flawed, to be honest, to be wounded and whole all at once. Months later, I was invited to speak at a literary forum in Tokyo. I wore a simple navy kimono. No watch, no tie, just me. During the Q&A, someone asked, "Do you still believe in love?" I paused, then smiled. "I believe in stories," I said, "because stories reveal what we fear, what we crave, and what we deny. Love is one kind of story. But so is silence. So is betrayal." I signed books after that. A long line. One woman clutched her copy like a lifeline. A man in his 70s told me his wife had left him for her therapist. "But your chapter on the koi pond," he said, eyes wet, "made me remember I can still feed myself peace." At the end of the event, just before the lights dimmed, I stood on stage one last time. "I have nothing against yoga," I said, Voice steady. But if enlightenment requires a locked door, then maybe it's not light you're finding in there. Laughter. Then silence. The good kind. I walked out into the Tokyo night, a copy of my book in hand. The city buzzed around me, vibrant and indifferent, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt neither betrayed nor abandoned. I felt heard, because in the end, I didn't need him to say sorry. I just needed to speak first.